So everyone, we're on record now, and this is workshop number 2 of a blind tasting workshop that we're doing 4. So hopefully if you are watching this recording, you're going to get the most out of it. And if you're watching this for the second time after you're participating live, I hope you have a great class and you enjoyed everything. So with that said, I want to do this really fun thing. If we were all together in a room, I might ask, before we unmute or before we mute everyone, I might ask you one by one to say a word that you've used to describe wine in the past. And I really just want it to be one word because I realized we have a time constraint. So what I'm going to do while we're still on this like kind of gallery view is I'm going to unmute you. I'm going to say your name. When I am done unmuted, when you say your name, or sorry, when you say your descriptor, it could be about the wine you're drinking. It could be about a wine you've had in the past. It could be like your favorite word to describe wine. I want you to then mute yourself after I call on you. So if I wasn't clear, I'm going to unmute you and then you mute yourself. And I'm just going to go along the whole top screen and I'm going to get everyone to say one word about wine. It could be about the glass that you have in front of you, or it could be something that you use all the time to describe wine. And the reason I'm doing this is 1, I want to hear your beautiful voices. And 2, I realize that the language of wine is different for people. Which is to say, like, we teach a culture of language that is based on, like, being, you know, maybe a wine professional. But that doesn't mean that that's the only way to describe wine. So it can be as wacky as you want to be. And I might use some of those common descriptors later on and say, if you didn't know what they meant, what they might mean if you were using them in the context of a wine professional. So that said, forgive me if I don't say your name right, or if you have a name that's a hash, like kind of like a handle, I might have to use that. Okay, so Janine, I'm unmuting you. Hold on. Okay. It's not letting me unmute Janine. So let me mute. Weird. All right. Very bizarre. All right. So technology is failing me for a second. Hold on. All right. How about this? Maybe you guys can unmute yourself. I have no idea why I'm not allowed to unmute all of a sudden, because I can always unmute people. Ah.
Okay.
All right. Well, let's get started. Janine, do you have the capacity to unmute yourself? We'll come back to her. Oh wait, let me try this. Participants, guys, don't talk if unmute all. Here's what's going to happen. All participants are unmuted now. Okay, here's what's going to happen. Don't try not to talk over each other. Okay. So I'm Laura. I'm going to wait for Janine, but I'm going to describe my wine with one word, and I'm going to show you what I want you to do. Ripe stone fruit. Okay, Savannah, you're next. Any word?
I typically like to describe wine to people who don't drink it as communal or a great unifier.
Okay, so you're using like the philosophical way to describe wine, which I love. Okay, you can do that too, because that's like really inspiring. So thanks, Savannah. You can mute now. How about you, Carol? Okay, no one can hear you, but you have to unmute. I thought I muted you. I don't know what's going on.
Unmute. There we go. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Hey, okay, let's hear
Yep.
from
Citrus.
you. Okay, how about you, Claire?
Earthy.
Great. John?
Minerally.
All right. Michaela?
Floral.
Great. How about you, Jeff?
One of today's wines is banana.
Banana. Ooh, I'm going to tell you what that means later. Jeff?
Mouth-watering.
Ooh, okay. He's talking about acidity. Ryan, if you're there. We'll go, we can come back to Ryan, but Ty? Some people have their mute blocked. I think that's what it was, which is fine. I don't want to force anyone. Robert? What?
Lemon.
Lemon. Okay, Shakira, my girl.
So I'm going to describe this as a bright.
Bright. I love that. How about you, Kelly? Are you there?
I'm here. Wet earth or wet dirt.
Wet earth.
That's
or
more of an aroma, but
No, that's great. That works. Diana? What'd you say?
Brioche.
Brioche. I think she's drinking champagne. I know her crew is. Enrique, are you there, friend?
Yes, I'm here. Hello, everybody. Bitter.
Bitter. Okay, so bitter orange is like phenolic bitterness. Dana, are you there? Some people sometimes walk away. How about you, Sheila?
White pepper and arugula.
Ooh, somebody knows what you're drinking. Okay, Venkat.
Yeasty.
Yeasty, great. How about you, Nicole? Nice to see you.
You too. Stainless.
Okay, so something like crisp that reminds you of a stainless steel tank. Andrew.
I'm going to say sweet.
Okay, sweet. How about you, Susan?
I would say chocolate and raspberry.
Ooh, she might be drinking Merlot. Jimmy and crew. Hi, Tony.
We already said brioche.
All right. Okay.
Well,
Oh, are people switching because they're no? They shouldn't be. Kelsey.
Citrus.
Okay, Kathleen.
Lemon rind.
Lemon rind. Steven.
Smoke.
Smoke. Okay, great. Let's see who's next. Vincent. How you doing, Vincent?
Hey, how you doing? Creamy.
Creamy. Okay, great. How about you, Dwight? What do you got for us?
Herbaceous.
Herbaceous. Nice. Natalia.
Hey, mine is spicy today.
Spicy. Okay, great. Well, that's good because that's the class topic. Jesse.
I would say ripe strawberry.
Ripe strawberries. Okay, great. I love the quantifier of the strawberries. Courtney.
I'm tasting like grapefruit pith.
Ooh, I like that. Grapefruit pith. Danielle. We can come back to her. Oh, there she is. What do you got for us, Danielle? All right, we'll go back. John.
This one tonight is tropical and chalky.
Love it. Thanks, John. Okay, let's see if I got everyone. It looks like that I finished page 2. If anyone was not asked to describe their word, please feel free to talk now. If not, we're going to mute all. Last call. Okay. All right. Well, we have a dynamic group of folks here, as you can see. So I think language is really important. I got an opportunity to teach a blind tasting class in Seoul, Korea. Oops, what did I do there? Hold on. And hold on. Sorry, I'm like really having trouble today. It must be like the full moon from yesterday because like my technology's all off and now we're back. Shakira, I swear you taught me better than this. I'm not bad at this Zoom thing.
I was going to say, did I jinx you because I'm here?
No, so I just want to shout out to Shakira. She's my really good friend, and she's one of the first people that taught me how to do these Zoom classes. When we first started, it was like day 3 of quarantine, and she was like working her butt off, having her phone, her iPad, and another system, showing me how to do this correctly. So I appreciate you so much, and I'm glad you joined. She's on vacation, folks, so she's going to drink some wine with us. Okay, so I was saying I had the great opportunity to teach a blind tasting class in Seoul, Korea. And one of the reasons I had to start off by warming up is one, I wanted to like make sure you realize that there's so many great people here. And 2, because language is really the thing that we have that we use to communicate wine. But we have to understand that a word that we might use might be foreign to another person, whether it's because they've yet to hear it, they've yet to taste it, yet to experience it, or because they use different words or smell different foods or vegetables or adjectives for describing wine. So the beautiful thing is that it is subjective, that we do get to decide how we use language to describe wine, and that there is a uniform language that we can sort of can guide us, can help us get on the same page. And when I was in Korea and I was tasting wine, of course, we were teaching in English, we had a translator, and I was helping like young Master Sommelier students at that time learn about our grid and our system. But I recognized the fact that in order for me to be a more effective teacher, I would have had to really learn the foods, the culture, and the sensations that if you grew up in Korea, you might feel different about things like bitterness or sweetness or fruitiness. So today's topic on blind tasting is about spice in wine. And we're going to review some of the different, I guess you can say, types of things that add spice to wine. And we're going to talk about the dorky details, as I call it, of where we get these spice flavors. And we can use our language, whatever language we want, to describe these wines. So one other thing I want to mention is that some people have the same wine, as we send out a backpack of wines, and we had some blind tasting wines. If you got those backpacks and you have the blind tasting wines 1, 2, and 3, of course you could open all 3, you could open 1, you could open, you could Coravin them all. And if you don't, because like you live in a state where we don't ship to, or you just have a great wine cellar or wine collection, it's not necessary for you to have the same wines as we're going to use in some of the examples. It's really any wine that has spice maybe would be an inspiration, so that you learn about the art of where spice comes from, but that you should not stress out about, I don't have the same wine you have, Laura, this is causing me like anxiety, I just don't want that. So with that said, you might have remembered the grid from last week. Somebody asked me why, they sent me a private note, so thank you for asking. What does it mean on this section where it says wine is? I think that was John, if I can remember. But anyway, wine is what I do every time I tasted a wine whenever I was studying for various exams. I might print a copy of this grid as you see it now. And I had a binder. I was like into keeping all of my notes, and I had a 3-hole punch my tasting grids, and I would write, once I found out what the wine was, I would write the actual name of the wine. So if you're following the grid, this is the appearance and the nose, this is the palate. If you were guessing, you might write final conclusion, I don't know, I think I'm drinking Sancerre from the Loire Valley from France from 2016. But let's say it was not 2016 Sancerre. You might write wine is Grüner Veltliner from Austria. And then you can say, well, where did I go wrong? Later on, if you're months later looking at your tasting notes, you might say, oh, every time I taste Sauvignon Blanc, I mistake it for Grüner Veltliner. Maybe I should get those 2 grapes side by side, and I should figure out what did those things mean to me. And I might even look and not blind taste them the next time I had those, and actually see what I was describing without blind tasting. So with that said, that's the answer to your question. And we can go through review today. So hopefully you're chatting amongst yourselves. By the way, cheers. Have a glass of wine. Have a sip of wine. Have a couple sips of wine. Loosen your palate up. There's no right or wrong way to do it. My habits make me inhale a little bit and get some air flowing through my mouth. I will say when I was taking various exams, I would always wake up in the morning, and if I had an exam, I would rinse my mouth with wine. This is not to be like too complicated, but I will say sometimes I heard people that used to take exams say, oh, I don't brush my teeth the morning of an exam because I don't want the toothpaste to mess up my mouth. I say, brush your teeth, people. Do not take the first day of an exam as a decision to not brush your teeth. You've been brushing your teeth your whole life. but maybe after you brush your teeth and you've had breakfast, or your stomach has like enough, you have substance in your stomach, and you have your anxiety a little bit like less, I can't speak today. Increased anxiety is not there. Okay, got it. Then you might decide to take a bottle of neutral white wine, like a Pinot Grigio or a Sauvignon Blanc from Sancerre, and take a sip of it and swirl it around your mouth so it's not the first wine you have the day of your exam. So if that's important to you, just remember that it's not a bad idea to rinse your mouth with wine after you've taken toothpaste and brushed your teeth. Okay, so let's do a little review. I was saying that for those of you that participated, and this is not, you don't have to actually say the answers, but I'm just going to kind of like ask you, maybe you want to write them in the chat, which white wine of these, like these colors here, might be affected by botrytis just by looking at the color. If you can recall, I said botrytis actually adds color to white wine. So perhaps one of these pale gold or deep gold ones would be the answer to that. So botrytis, the actual, which we're going to learn a lot about, the actual mold, has an enzyme called lactase, and it actually affects the color of the wine. So it could be very, very young botrytis wine, but it would still be pale gold. It's interesting because we're going to learn about Tokai and Sauterne, and both of those have botrytis, and one has oak and one doesn't. So this might be the color pale gold of a botrytis without oak. This might be the color of botrytis with oak. So that's just informative. Which white wine is young? And you're probably going to guess the one with the slight green hints, because green is an indication of youthfulness or a cool climate or a young bottled wine. Remember that the term green means young. Okay, this is interesting. I'll give you a second. Which red wine has a low pH? It's kind of a trick question because if you remember, a low pH has high acid. And we said, which one of these colors is likely to be higher in acid? So I say, for the most part, the lighter colored wines, like these pale bricks, those are high acid. And which red wine is likely from a cool climate? And if you can remember, we generally look at these purple colors from cool climates. So it's kind of like the opposite, right? Low pH has high acid and it's more red, and a cool climate has probably, red wine has a cool climate and it looks deeper in purple color. Okay, so do you guys remember there is a name of a grape that does not have acylated anthocyanins? There is a grape that has a very hard, it has trouble getting pigment, and that is the grape Pinot Noir. So Pinot Noir will not really have a lot of color. But if you can recall, which red wine shows high accumulation of anthocyanins in red grapes? Is it sunlight or is it heat? So just as we go through these, what I want you to do is just think about these questions. You can look at class notes from class number 1, but we have a couple of other reviews. Black fruits display what kind of anthocyanin content? They have darker color berries and they're deeper color. So Cabernet, Sauvignon, and Syrah. So they have black fruits. Just when they display higher anthocyanin content, they're equal darker colored. Red wines display lower anthocyanin content, so lighter berries. Okay, what happens with color when you macerate wines long time, like in Barolo and Barbaresco? The color decreases during longer macerations, which seems kind of like the opposite of what you would expect. But if you age your wine in new oak, you get increased color. Okay, so great. Long aging in oak equals lower color, but oak tannins in new oak equals increased wine color. So this is just review. You're going to see it when we send out the notes. You can kind of practice some of these things. A slight spritz may occur in young wines, bottled early. Slow tears, alcohol in wine is a predictor. Slow tearing, slow forming. So just remember when you get these notes, this is a good question, a good opportunity for you to review some of this stuff. Okay, what is the name of this here? Wet newspaper, damp basement, mold. That's TCA. It's a fault in wine. Barnyard, Band-Aid. You guys can chat about that. Say, oh, I think when I get this barnyard, I'm getting Brettanomyces, a vinegar, nail polish remover, volatile acidity. And you might even ask yourselves and start to think about what are the wines that I'm likely going to find VA, volatile acidity. Where we're going to find that? Maybe Italian wines, maybe wines that are made in large kind of formats, like large barrique. Okay, what about this? Walnut, bruised apple, cooked flavors. That's maderized or oxidized wines. And then we have some sulfur with rotten cabbage, burnt match. Sometimes, by the way, you do get a flinty minerality that might be a complementary aroma, something that you love in mineral whites. That can be from sulfur. So sometimes I think people are confused with New World, Old World. If a wine is just finished bottled and a winemaker adds sulfur dioxide, it can smell like minerals and you can confuse yourself. Oh, this must be Old World. I get so much minerality. But it's kind of like they can intentionally do that. So just keep that in mind. Okay, these are still reviews we had, and we're going to dive deep onto this in class 2. We had bell pepper, grass, jalapeno, and asparagus. Okay, these are the languages for, and you probably guessed it, pyrazine. This is something we're going to talk a lot about today because it's technically a spice. So some people can't even smell it. There's a low detection threshold. So black pepper, white pepper is called rotundone, which you're going to learn about today in further detail. And we're also going to learn about this. Where do we find these passion fruit, grapefruit, guava, lemongrass? These are aromas from thiols. Thiols, we also use these descriptors in some of the Bordeaux grapes, like Sauvignon Blanc or Cabernet Sauvignon, or even Cabernet Franc to some degree. The thing is, we're going to talk about why you might smell these aromas but not taste them. And it's really, really important because if I were to think about a Sauvignon Blanc that had passion fruit and guava, I would often be thinking warm climate. When I smell that, it's exotic, it's, tropical. So the interesting thing is you can get those aromas and then the wine can be really sour or really like restrained or cool climates like citrus, grapefruit, pith. So you're like asking yourself, which I want you to do in general, if I smell something that's different than I taste, why? So if I smell exotic and then I taste restrained, I'm not gonna conclude that the wine is exotic because it's from a warm climate. That would be a good indication of thiols, which we'll discuss, and why you don't taste them but you smell them. So geranium, pine, rose, and lychee, that's a good thiol, or sorry, I'm like losing my mind today. Monoterpenes for floral, thiols for exotic. And then last but not least, we have lactones, which is vanilla, hazelnut, dill, and coconut, which are caused by oak use. All right, everyone. So these are our descriptors for fruit and character of fruit. Somebody mentioned tart red berries, ripe strawberries. So we should always be quantifying our fruit. And when we get to our palate, we have our structure, our sugar, our body, our acid, alcohol, tannin, our finish, and our complexity. So hopefully you remember some of these things. This is kind of like another, when you get the notes, an opportunity for you to test your knowledge. Dry whites land somewhere between 0 to 4 grams of residual sugar, although dry Vouvray and German Rieslings can be considered dry and still have 9 grams. Something to think about. Low alcohol, light body, high alcohol, full body, right? So you know these things. Residual sugar increases a wine's viscosity. So you might see, swirl your glass and see, wow, the tears are slow forming. It feels very thick. That could be because of alcohol, or it could be because of residual sugar. So something to keep in mind when we have the dry extract, it's the sum of the dissolved solid. So what gives wine body? Residual sugar, tannin. Of course, the polyphenols from the skins, alcohol, minerality, and so on. How you guys doing? Okay, let's see. All right, good. We're in good timing. Acid in a wine lends a crisp, somebody used that word, crisp undercurrent to the wine. Unlike tannins, we know acid makes our mouth salivate. So as we drink wine, I love this statement. It's just my favorite. I keep saying it. As we drink wine and other acidic beverages, the pH in our mouth decreases, which means our acid increases. So opposite pH and acid. The saliva is worried about our mouth. It's like your teeth are going to kind of get eroded if we don't dilute the acid in your mouth. So we start salivating, which dilutes the acid in our mouth, and the pH increases, and it's a more neutral level. So the sharper and more acidic the wine, the more we salivate. Okay, and there we have it. TA refers to the sum of wine's acids. They're mostly tartaric. They can be malic, they can be citric, but wine typically falls between 4.5 and 9 grams of total acidity. It is important, and I want to make this point. It is important that we think about sugar and acid together. I was attending this fantastic seminar where people would say, you know, oh, this wine is really sweet, but this wine is dry. I think when you're talking about sweetness, you also have to talk about acid. So a wine could have the exact same amount of sweetness, but let's say the total acidity is higher in wine 1 than lower in wine 2. Well, wine 1 will taste or appear drier. Remember that the balance of acid and sugar are really to be taken together. So we often find that German Rieslings are a lot sweeter than we think, but the acid is so high, right? So that's something interesting to think about. Next time you're tasting wine with a winemaker, say, if you're doing it for professional reasons, oh, this is a really, you know, I always like to ask, like, if they know, and don't do it if you're like with your friends, because then you just seem like a dud. But if you're by yourself and you really are analyzing them for the purposes of professional reasons, you might say, oh, what's the total acidity of this wine and what's the residual sugar as when it applies, meaning like you're tasting in Germany, the new vintage, and you want to know, like, was it a cool vintage or a warm vintage? All right, you guys are like, you're dorking out too much, Laura. Okay, so here we have it. We're reminding ourselves about tannin and alcohol. Tannins bind with saliva and they precipitate out of solution. That means tannin steals our saliva. So if you're wondering, what does tannin do to your mouth? It dries your mouth out. It steals your saliva. I'm using that next time. This tannin is so harsh, it stole all the saliva out of my mouth. I'm trying to keep myself entertained here. Okay, but it's true. It makes your mouth dry, right? Alcohol low equals less than 10% alcohol. That's low alcohol. Guys, this doesn't really exist. There's not that many wines in the world that are low alcohol. Medium minus, okay, that's more like it, right? And even those are rare because the world is warming up. Most of the fine wine we're gonna see is between medium to medium plus alcohol, right? So just keep in mind when you're doing a review, okay, you know, if I think I'm drinking Napa Valley Cab, it's most likely at high alcohol. A lot of us don't feel comfortable saying extremes. We don't like to say high. We go medium, medium, medium for everything. It's important that you kind of say what you're thinking. This is medium plus alcohol because it's less than 15, but it's higher than, let's say, 14. So just, you know, and also if you're having trouble, let's say you're tasting and you're often getting the alcohols wrong, it's a good thing to get 3 bottles of wine that you know the alcohol, because you can turn the labels around and look at them and say, oh, this wine is 12% alcohol. This one is 14, this one is 12, this one is 13.9, and this one is 15. That might give you a real good sense. I attended this class at UC Davis once where they literally gave us 3 different wines, alcohol, and said, order these in low to high. If I had you all in a room together, I would give you definitively different alcohols and say, please put this in order of lowest to highest. I might give you definitive acids, right? And I would say, put these in order from lowest to highest. So you can do this at home. You can get a low tannin wine, a medium tannin wine, and a high tannin wine if you're struggling to find tannin on your palate and figure out how do you gauge these things. So it's very exciting. And now we're on to our new class lecture. Okay, everyone, botrytis. These are some pictures of botrytis grapes. I want to show you two different things. This first one on the right, it has botrytis in the center, but you can see this healthy grape cluster all around. The other one has botrytis all over, and it only has 3 or 4 berries that are not affected by botrytis. So for those of you that don't know, botrytis is a noble rot, but it is a rot, which means that it is a fungus, or mold rather, I should say, that affects grapes. What botrytis does is it works the grapes into a state of dehydration, that's key, which gives way to higher concentrations of sugar and acid. Acid is key. So the botrytis actually happens when you have a wet and warm environment, like most molds do, right? So you can imagine the key is to not split the grape open. By the way, we're talking about spice in wine, and one of the most intense feelings that you can get when you think you're tasting spice in a wine comes from botrytis. So this is the reason for the spice, or one reason for the spice. So back to our grapes. If they split and the mold gets inside the actual pulp, then it becomes bad rot. So you can get gray rot, you can get different types of rot that are not noble, and those rots might give you a mushroomy smell. So I was picking grapes in Austria around October 31st of 2009, and we had botrytis in our vineyard. It looked like the top picture because we would have these healthy clusters of Riesling and Grüner Veltliner grapes, and we would cut out with our shears, like our grape shears, just the rot, and we would, or it was botrytis. It was technically good, but we cut it out. Why would we cut out the botrytis in this case? The winemaker wanted to make a dry wine. He didn't want his wine, his Riesling, or his Grüner Veltliner to have the aromas of honey and marmalade and ginger. Okay, because maybe that's not a common thing. Not everybody loves those aromas. So it might be a harder sell. If you're trying to make a dry white wine, you might not want those aromas. So that was what we did. We would take this cluster like this, and we would keep, I'm going to call them the healthy grapes. So you, believe it or not, you can get botrytis in Chardonnay. Some vintages of Burgundy, like white Burgundy from France, if it's a warm and wet vintage, if you have rain right before a warm harvest, you can get botrytis. And so sometimes it doesn't have to be full-on dessert wine in order for you to detect it. So honey, marmalade, ginger, chamomile. I've also heard people say wasabi, which is interesting. I've heard that, I don't know. I think the interesting thing is sometimes there's smells and sometimes there's sensations. I do feel like sometimes with rot, with some kind of mold, you can feel it in your nose too, right? So when I was picking those grapes in harvest in Austria, when you touch a cluster of botrytis grapes or rotted grapes, rotted meaning good or bad, they kind of fall apart. They like disintegrate. And that smell can get up into your nasal passage or on the grape skins. So you can feel like anywhere from a mushroomy, funky, sort of powdered, earthy aroma all the way to the extremes of basically a dried, concentrated citrus, like the marmalade we're talking about. As you can imagine, these shriveled grapes, and the better picture is this bottom picture, they make very, very little wine. So try squeezing one of those like dried grapes and you get much lower concentration. When you go to ferment dried grapes, it's much trickier. So it's harder to get the fermentation to start. So you have these yeasts, and yeast eat sugar and they turn it into alcohol. But if you have a high amount of sugar in a grape, the yeast get kind of lazy and they like fatigued and they stop and they start and they stop and they start. So, and sometimes you can take like 4 months to ferment, like Sauterne. So you also get, as you can imagine, smells in general. So, so just keep in mind that you get some fermentation smells. Somebody said earlier when we were describing wine, banana. You can have smells that come from yeast. So we'll talk about it later on, but like you can get a smell of banana when you use certain types of yeast. So you could imagine the yeast strains that you need when you have botrytis are a lot stronger. So sometimes you can get a combination of the yeast smell and the botrytis or the spice. So typically we have honeysuckle. Sometimes we get these raisins or these dried fruits. You might often find too that you get uneven ripening. As you can imagine, you might get something dried and something fresh. And they typically age really, really well because of their acidity. So the sugar goes up, but the acidity also goes up. All right, so something else to keep in mind. Botrytis, the great dessert wines, they're all situated near bodies of water where the mists are created. So we have a confluence usually of 2 rivers. So we have a faster cold moving body of water and a slower warm body of water. So for example, you have the Bodrog River, which is the top picture, and the Tisza River. Those are 2 rivers that converge in Hungary, and specifically in the Tokaj region. And then in Sauterne, which is the bottom picture, you have the Syrah River and the Garonne River, which the confluence of these 2 rivers, one being a faster cold moving body of water, one being a slow moving body of water. So Syrah is faster, the Garonne is slower. They meet and then they create this mist, and the warm and sort of wet mist is what makes Sauterne possible, or Tokaj possible. So you have to have a lot of sunshine and you have to have a lot of warmth. Generally, you can look at rain near harvest, especially during warmer vintages, and you can predict botrytis. So why am I telling you this? Imagine you're tasting a white Burgundy and you're trying to guess the vintage. If you smell botrytis, and if you know a little bit about whether it rained during the vintage and whether it was warm, you might be able to narrow down the vintage closer. Again, there's a lot of theory behind some of this, but you learn the why, and then you can seek out all of the things that are happening in vintages. So vintages, they're really an advanced theory where you can guess one versus the other. What you need for botrytis to thrive is soft skin and closed bunches. We have the grape Semillon. It's very, very susceptible to rot. Sauvignon Blanc, or to botrytis. Sauvignon Blanc, less susceptible, but still. Chenin Blanc, Riesling, Gewürz, and Tokaj. In the case of Tokaj, the grape is called Ferment. That's the grape that you find in the wine region of Tokaj. We don't really talk about botrytis in red wine because it is not actually something that we consider to be good. But we get the Tokaj, or sorry, Pinot Noir and Merlot, they're susceptible to botrytis. So we know that botrytis exists since at least the 1630s, and that it was first kind of talked about or written about in the wines of Hungary. And this process called, Suzu, if you ever see this, a Suzu is a process of which you basically dehydrate grapes. So it's used in Tokaj. So if you have a wine, perhaps you have a Semillon or a Sauvignon Blanc, or you have a Chenin Blanc, or you don't know what you have because you got a blind tasting and we sent you the wine, I might ask yourself, okay, what do I smell? Can I smell any of that saffron, ginger? And just familiarize, if you have an opportunity, to blind taste wine with botrytis. Now, also when we do these classes, you don't have to be able to, they don't have to be wrapped in tinfoil. You could just be smelling a wine with botrytis side by side with a wine that doesn't have it, just so that you really cement in your mind what that smells like. Hopefully that makes sense. Let me check in on the chat. Let's see, I think it's because there's less airflow. Yep. Oh, I think my husband's on and he might be answering some questions. So hopefully he's doing that. I don't know, I might say it's me, but it's really him. Yep. So, okay, everybody, so we'll go on. So next thing is rotundone. I love rotundone. I have to admit, my favorite wines are savory. So I love the spice. Remember, here's another way we can use language, right? Spice. What does spice mean? Could be savory spice, sweet spice, baking spice. So today's topic is spice. Certainly, if you were to describe botrytis, you would use sweet spice. You might even say, sometimes I used to say gingerbread, right? Gingerbread could be like a sweet spice. You think about those gingerbread castles you built as kids. But really, rotundone, this sesquiterpene, it means five section terpene. This is responsible for a high peppery aroma. We most associate with Syrah and Grüner Veltliner. But there's also a heavy amount of rotundone rather in Mourvedre, which is the grape in Bandol, and some Italian red grapes. You find it sometimes in Sangiovese, in Schioppettino, and so a lot of Italian reds, like the esoteric grapes that we might not necessarily use in blind tastings, they can have rotundone. The other cool thing is sometimes you might want to taste grapes that are not the classic grapes and just ask yourselves, could they have any of these characteristics? We probably wouldn't use these on the sommelier floor to describe wine, but we would say blackberry, or sorry, we would say smoked wood, we would say black pepper, white pepper, pink pepper, or we would just simply say savory spice. We could use things like oregano or dried herbs as another way of kind of describing this rotundone. But it's a very low threshold, so only a few parts per million. I would do this tonight if you want. Take your pepper grinder in your hand tonight and see if you can smell, when you're done with this class, actual pepper. Some people can't detect it. So if you can't detect pepper because your nose, some part of the population is unable to smell the compound, if you can't, then you might not be able to rely on that as a marker for a grape. So for example, when I'm studying with some people and helping people learn about blind tasting, I might say, oh, Syrah is one of the common grapes that has rotundone. So you should get black pepper. But if you can get Syrah, it's not just black pepper, right? It could have olive, bacon, smoked meat, could have tart red fruit, it could be purple in color. We can't just say it's Syrah because I get pepper. And Zinfandel also has rotundone. So what if we can't detect it? So I have so many people that are like, this can't be Syrah. It can't be Syrah. It has no pepper. Well, okay, what if you miss the pepper? What if you're having a bad day, right? You can't just say it is or it isn't something just because of one thing that's missing or is there. You have to have multiple reasons why you're calling a grape something. And that's why I think it's helpful. So if you have wine number 3 in your blind tasting pack, go ahead and give it a smell. I have a wine, a red wine here, and sometimes it's not so obvious as like a fresh black pepper. Sometimes it just smells slightly green. I went to the spice market in Turkey, and I got all these peppercorns. I got some green ones, some white ones, some pink ones, some black ones, all different color peppercorns. Believe it or not, they have a high threshold or a low threshold, even within peppercorns. So you can imagine, it might not just jump out of the glass. This one that I have downstairs, it almost smells like cocoa or chocolate in a smoked wood. Has anyone ever had like green walnuts? I get like kind of like a smoked wood or small like green walnut. The other thing about pepper, you get it up into your nasal passage. So when I smell pepper, and do this tonight, take a big smell and you'll almost wince. You want to take your head back because the smell gets really, it's like almost very fine. A bad story is that, it's a bad story because it almost went wrong for me. I was blind tasting Grüner Veltliner all throughout trying to pass my blind tasting at Masters, and I couldn't get Grüner Veltliner to save my life, which is very weird because I love the grape. but I kept missing it. Remember in the beginning, I said, if you keep missing something, maybe you want to use your tasting grid. So I kept missing it. So I had anxiety about it. I was convinced because I was bad at it, I was going to get it on my exam. So I go through the motions the day of my exam. It's my last exam of masters, and I'm tasting this wine and I'm going, oh, this, I get this rotundone, I get this thing in my nose, really high tone, and it must be Gruner. So I make up this whole grid. I think you guys are familiar with those words right now, right? So I make up the grid. I say, oh, it's lemon, it's pepper, it's celeries, it's lentils. I'm lying. I really only got what I thought was the pepper in my nose. And it turns out it's Chablis. But because I'm BSing and I'm saying, oh, it's this, it's this, it's this, I almost failed my exam, because what was happening? In Chablis, you get chalk, and it's kind of a porous type of mineral, and you might get it up inside your nose. And rotundone, you feel the same way. So when I took a step back and I said, oh, wait, I'm lying. I didn't get any of that celery, lentils, and all these other white pea tendrils and whatever I was saying, arugula. I was saying all this other stuff. Then when I realized, oh, maybe it's chalk that's giving me that smell, I was able to correct. So hopefully that makes sense. Just remember my little mantra, it's not just one thing that makes a grape. So we move on to spice, and the next spice that's big on our spice range here is thiols. So thiols, what are they? Well, this is really important. Sometimes you get this smoky, skunky could be interesting, coffee, meat. These are sulfur-containing compounds. So what they do is they're odorless, and they're precursors in ripe grapes. So what happens if you smell them? You're not gonna, or sorry, if you taste a grape that has thiols, you won't actually taste a flavor. So unlike other terpenes, remember terpenes they actually taste and smell similar. So terpenes, they could be like floral, lychee, roses. You will smell it and you will taste it. But thiols, they don't have any discernible flavor in fruit, and they're non-volatile substances. The only way they become volatile, and they become volatile in the smell only, is when the yeast start metabolizing them. So what that means is we smell tropical, but we don't taste tropical. That's because of thiols. So thiols exist in certain grapes, and these grapes include Cabernet Sauvignon, Sauvignon Blanc, Chenin Blanc, Riesling, Semillon, and Merlot, and there's a handful of others. But they're responsible for why you might smell things like guava or cat pee, as they say. They might smell very exotic, as I mentioned before. So just keep in mind, I've seen a lot of people accidentally go to the wrong climate because a grape had thiols. In Merlot, the thiols make it smell like chocolate. So you might get like a mocha, Swiss Miss, hot chocolate kind of thing. That's because of thiols and not necessarily oak. So sometimes people can mistake things for the other. You might get coffee and be like, oh, this is very oaky, but it doesn't have a lot of oak. So remember that you might smell it as coffee, but not taste it. So then you could say, oh, there's some new oak, but not a lot of new oak. Hopefully I'm not boring you. I'm always anxiety ridden that I'm just like boring. But you know, the thing is, this is the new normal. Like you're staring at a screen and you're not seeing anybody except a few folks. And you're like, okay, they're smiling, I'm good. Okay. Last but not least for spice, we have lactones. And all of these other things, they're precursors in grapes, which means certain grapes have them and certain grapes don't. So when I think about monoterpenes, those are things that exist in grapes and some don't have it. When I think about rotundone, certain grapes have it, certain grapes don't. We haven't talked about, because it's not a spice, but there's something called TDN. We're gonna have it in a different class. It's what gives you the smell of gasoline or diesel. So certain grapes have it, certain grapes don't. If you think about pyrazines, we haven't talked about that yet because it's a vegetal class, but certain grapes have it, certain grapes don't. Diacetyl and lactones really are based on winemaking. So diacetyl is the movie butter popcorn. You can get like butter, you know, that kind of smell of butter that you might find in some California Chardonnay. That's a byproduct of malolactic fermentation. And Sauterland, which I love, by the way, this is curry smell. Oh my God, I love wines that have Sauterland, even though we're not discussing it in depth tonight. Sauterland, you might find, if you really want an example of it, go ahead and get yourself some sherry or some Madeira, which I love that smell. You might find Sauterland or the curry smell in Amarone. I always get this exotic Indian spice in Amarone that's just like, it just kind of smells so intense, and that's always how I get the marker for Amarone, but it's basically, it happens in the role of oxidized styles of winemaking. So that makes sense. Sherry, Vigneron, Madeira. So it's also synthesized in grapes by botrytis, so you might get some overlap, or you might smell as wine is aged and it has botrytis, you might have some of that kind of walnut aroma. But hazelnut, vanilla, coconut, and caramel, they're a type of ester. They're lactones that are in grapes for sure, but most of the lactones we smell are the byproduct of winemaking. So they're derived from oak. So the first whiskey lactone appeared in wines aged in new oak. It had sweet, woody, coconut-like fragrance. And I remember last week explaining that American oak, it contained larger concentrations of this whiskey lactone, hence the smell is coconut. And American oak has a deeper pour. The wine goes into it more and you get a little bit more, some people would say harsh, I would say powerful oak. And now we had a volunteer, Michaela. She wanted to go over the wine in our pack that was white. If anybody is looking for, they have a wine that they want to describe that's not in a backpack, but they're not sure how would they describe it, we can have another volunteer. We have a decent amount of time, because we technically said class used to be an hour, but we were going to do a little bit longer than an hour, maybe just before 9 is ideal, or we can call it 8:45. So we have like 15 minutes to just talk about the wines that we're drinking, which I think is really helpful. I know when I first started, I was intimidated to describe wine. I felt like I was going to say something wrong, and you might be feeling that too. So let's have Michaela, because she has the wine that we sent. She has wine number 1. Let's have her describe wine number 1 whenever she's ready. And you can use the grid. You can follow along. If you're not drinking it, just follow along with your wine to say, what is my color? And even if you know what your own wine is, like I know what my wine 1 is, but I might just still go through the motions of doing the blind tasting because maybe it makes me more thoughtful. So are you there, Michaela?
Yes.
Hi.
Hi. So my wine is, I said pale, oh, can I see it? It's like pale gold color. It is, I would say like star bright, low concentration. I didn't really get any secondary colors, but I also have bad lighting. And the viscosity is definitely medium minus. On the nose, the wine is sound. I'd say moderate plus intensity. I definitely, my first thought when I picked it up was it's very much like apple juice, like yellow and like yellow green apple. Also maybe a little bit of mare lemon. Sorry, I'm looking at my notes here.
Great.
On the palate, I say definitely a more mineral driven wine. And the fruit is confirmed. Also a lot of like white blossom, like orchard blossom, honeysuckle, definitely like chamomile, like almost like white herbal tea.
I want to stop for 1 second. I love that because first of all, I know what she's drinking because it was one of the backpack wines. But also I like the distinction between floral and tea. So there are grapes that are high in terpenes. So they would smell like, you know, maybe fresh flowers. What you're describing is dried flowers, which is very important because that's what it has. And also sometimes people forget about these other things. Like we could use chamomile tea, where it means we get a teeny bit of flower, but we probably also get the green parts of the floral. So some of you that are like, well, I didn't get floral, don't beat yourself up. It's this kind of like tea, like almost fresh green herbs and fresh white baby flowers. So go out and have some tea tonight if you haven't had any chamomile recently. You know the smell. It's kind of fresh and slightly green at the same time. Good job. So keep going, Michaela. I'm sorry to interrupt you.
All right. I would say that the acidity is medium plus, the alcohol, medium plus as well. And body is kind of medium, yes. And then there's medium plus for the complexity and as well as the finish.
Okay, so I have a question. So we talked once, I had Gabriella Macari from Long Island North Fork Winery on once, and she told me like in MW, students we're often using, which I love, incorporating different language again, they often use shapes to describe acidity. And I know you said it's medium plus acidity, which I love. So if you had to think about a shape or an object, you don't, because sometimes shapes are hard too. Imagine it's an object. Acid is an object. What does it look like? What's that object?
It's more angular.
Great. I love it. So it's like a sword. It's like a knife. It's like something very sharp in acidity. That if you couldn't think of what she meant by medium plus acidity, that makes it a lot more clearer, right, guys? So we feel like it comes to a point. That might even be a way that we describe it to a guest. You know, right? It's charred, it's crisp, it's clean, it's got high acid, it's sharp, it's, you know, angular. So if you're ever reading notes, if you guys have trouble describing wine and you feel like you're boring yourself, you're always writing the same tasting notes, I would recommend getting a book like Robert Parker's Great Estates of the World, and reading his, not only his, I mean, it could be anyone that you admire, their descriptions for wine, like Kelly White's book, Napa Valley Here and Now. She writes the tasting notes for like hundreds and hundreds of Napa Valley cabs. And I look at it sometimes for inspiration. I'm like, oh, right, I could use that. So if you ever get in a rut, think about the way that others describe things, and maybe you can like find new ways to describe the same thing. Okay, so Michaela, do you know what the wine is, or you didn't unwrap it yet?
I did. I do know what the wine is, although I did do it on my own earlier, and I got it right. So
good job, everybody. Round of applause. So does anybody, has everyone chatted about what they think it is? And those that have it and unwrapped it or didn't unwrap it, everyone's saying Chenin. Okay, great. Chenin, maybe. Okay, good. So Michaela, go ahead and tell us what we sent you. And didn't have any botrytis. That's something I didn't hear. Maybe like
I did get botrytis on this. I forgot to say it though. I did get like a little bit on the tip of the tongue.
Great.
So it's, oh geez, this is backwards. The Lagrange, my French is horrible.
No, it's Lagrange Tiffany. You're right. It's good. Lagrange Tiffany, it's Montlouis, right? So Chenin Blanc from right across the river from Vouvray. And I think you described it perfectly. I used this wine once before with, actually with Gabriella, and we were talking about it, and she guessed the region because the wine has a little bit higher alcohol than some Vouvray, but not quite as much as Savennières, and maybe the teeniest bit of residual sugar. But the acid is so high, it's very hard to detect the teeniest bit of residual. So if you had that wine, you might consider putting your tongue in the tip of the wine and just checking if there's a little bit of RS. I do that sometimes when no one's looking. I'm like, and stick my tongue in my own glass. Okay, well, that was great. I appreciate you doing that. And is anyone drinking a white wine that we didn't send? So not that wine number one, that wanted to just take a kind of a group volunteer for the group to describe your wine. We could even guess what your wine is because we don't have it. Would anyone like to do a white wine? There's also wine number 2 in a backpack if anybody wants to volunteer to do wine number 2 from the backpack. Okay, no big deal. Let's see what's going on in my chat. So wine number 2, if no one wants to describe it. Oh, I see, I can. Who's I can? I am if no one else wants to. Sorry, I can't see who is saying that. That's me. Oh, Shakira, yay. Okay, good, go for it, Shakira. And then Vincent, you're next, I think. Okay, great, unmute.
All right, this wine is pale gold. There's no sign of gas or sediment to the wine. Viscosity is medium. I'll go medium. On the nose, crisp apple, lemon peel, maybe some white flour, not much. The wine is very aromatic. There's just a lot of apples and lemon. On the palate, I would call this, medium to medium plus acidity. On the palate, confirming those notes of apple, lemon zest. There's some essence of coconut, so I would detect some oak. The wine has a lot of good acid. It's quite round, indicating maybe some mallow, maybe not. It has a great mouthfeel and a pretty long finish.
Wow, okay, it sounds delicious. So perhaps we wanted to ask a few things as it relates to like winemaking or spice. So you can answer yes or no, or you can add on. So, because in the beginning it sounded like you were describing these beautiful crisp fruits, like you said lemon pith, and you said apple. So generally I was thinking, and probably your train of thought, everyone might be, oh, she's describing a cool climate white wine. And then I couldn't tell, maybe it was just my sound, if you said it is very aromatic or it's not very aromatic.
It's quite aromatic.
Great. So, but the aromas sound like the strong quality is coming from either mallow or from oaky. So that's interesting, right? Because the aromas, would you say there's any, you said a little bit of white flour, but it's not terpenes, is it? Do you get? No. Okay.
I definitely think that this is it could be either. I know what the wine is, so I know what it is, but this would throw me off blinding it too, because I would lean more to the side of oak than mallow. Yeah, but the mouthfeel is very.
Yeah, you described perfectly. Like, so to me, it smells like it has a lot of oak, and I'm not saying it's out of balance, but oak seems like higher than the fruit that matches it. So I might even go, oh, that sounds like a more New World wine because it's intensely aromatic and it has a decent amount of oak. So perhaps it's a New World from a cooler climate. The grape itself seems slightly neutral, could be Chardonnay. You said a little floral. Do you get any rotundone or any thiols, like maybe could be Sauvignon Blanc, but I'm asking, does it have guava, passion fruit, any of those things we learned about?
No.
So, what are you all thinking? So let's see what your chat's saying. Are you guys saying New World Chardonnay, Viognier? Ooh, whoever said that might be a good guess. Okay, so Torrontes. So the thing is, she does not have the wine we have with wine number 2. I think Shakira has her own wine. But if you have wine number 2 from the pack, it's a totally different wine than she's smelling. So just to be clear, she's drinking her own wine. We can talk about wine number 2 from the pack after. But probably with all that oak, you wouldn't get Torrontes because Torrontes is generally unoaked. So I'm going to go with New World California Chardonnay for Shakira's wine. I'm going to guess like a Sonoma Coast or Santa Barbara Chard. And I think we're in a current vintage. Probably Santa Barbara though.
I have never been more proud to study under you. Do you know why? Because it's Raj's 2018 Santa Barbara County Chardonnay.
Great. So very important, this is great because it smells like Old World, but it then finishes New World. So that's so cool. And we love Splendid and we love those wines. And Raj is a great winemaker. So kind of if you were, she's describing Old World, but then it tastes New World.
Yeah, this could easily be, I think, like I was trying to balance the questions.
Yeah, that's great. Okay.
I was trying to balance out what might be winemaking style versus oak because it drinks like white Burgundy, but there's still enough in there to not take you to the Old World. So this was a good one.
Great. I love that. I like the way you described it too. So perfectly set up for me, and I don't even have it in front of me. Okay, so now would anyone else like to talk about the wine that we sent? That was the wine number 2 in the backpack. If not, we can move forward and I can describe it for you. Okay, well, if you have yet to taste wine number 2 in your backpack and you want to know what it drinks like, I don't have it in front of me, but I will tell you that the classic markers for this grape are grapey. It's one of the few white grapes that smells like kind of grape juice. It also has very intense floral tone. And I might describe, if I was saying the color, I would say is a clear white wine, it's pale straw, it has a little bit of green. The rim variation is non-existent, in a no sediment, and viscosity is about moderate. But the nose is medium plus intensity, no flaws. The fruit is mostly exotic or tropical. We could say passion fruit, we could say lychee, we could say almost like a kiwi, but it also has a grapey grape, kind of green grapes. Intense floral, but almost a musky floral, which is to say that the floral smells like a little bit like when you leave your flowers in the water together and they have like a little bit of a dank kind of smell. But also the floral smells slightly synthetic. What I mean by that is it smells like everything is a little bit candied. I'm reminded of when I was a kid getting these like, I don't know if you ever had them, any of you, but there were these wax candles that had like liquid sugar in them. I used to spend all my lunch money on them. And you could kind of like bite the wax and suck out the syrup. So sometimes when I get that synthetic or kind of like that half fruity, half like plasticky smell, I might think of this grape. I'm sorry, I don't mean to disrespect the grape. It's kind of noble as well. A no oak, and it's a youthful wine. In the fruit, I would say similar. It's more of that kind of lime zest, grape juice, slightly candied, like Rose's lime juice almost, slightly exotic, tropical, guava, non-fruit floral, so terpenes are present. Maybe there's some thiols present as well with all that guava. Interestingly, no oak, not a lot of minerality. The wine is dry, but it definitely does not smell like it's going to be dry. So you're pleasantly surprised that it has a bitterness or a pulling on the tongue, that's phenolics. The body is about medium. Acid, it's oddly medium plus, but it's also bitter. So you're like, wait a minute, alcohol's moderate and the finish is medium. So you're kind of, because it gets acid, you're like wanting to go old world, but then it's too fake smelling. So you have to pull yourself back, like, where's the mineral? Where's the earthy? So remember that you can get high acid from adding acidity to wine. So tartaric acid can be added to increase. So you can do that. You can manipulate, but also high elevation. So your mind should go, where in the world is this kind of grape that's slightly floral and slightly bitter and slightly aromatic Rhône that's high elevation in the New World? And the answer would be, let's see if you chatted about it. You described the perfect, even if you don't have it, that's what it's supposed to taste like. It could be Clare Valley Riesling, could be Riesling. Muscat is a good guess because I described Muscat for sure. But one grape that no one was saying so far, at least in what I've been reading, is Torrontes. So the problem / solution is Muscat is the parent grape of Torrontes. It's a grape that was crossed with Criolla Chica. Well, that's the answer, right? It's Criolla Chica grape crossed with Muscat of Alexandria, created the grape Torrontes. So it's very unique to this area called Salta in Argentina, but hopefully that's what you guys got if you got wine number 2 in the backpack. Okay, last but not least, let's smell wine number 3. Would anyone like that has it from the backpack want to describe it, or does anybody want to describe a red wine in general? I know there was Vincent that wanted to go, and then we're going to end in just a minute. All right, I'm going to I'm going to go to the red wine grid in the meantime. Vincent, would you like to volunteer?
So I actually, I don't have the backpack with me.
That's perfect. You can drink your own wine. I would love to hear what you're drinking.
But I do have another white wine, so I don't know if you wanted to do.
No, I want to hear from you. So I want to hear whatever you're drinking. I want to guess what you're drinking.
Okay, cool. All right, so hopefully it's good enough lighting for you guys to see it as well. So for me, this wine here is, I would say, clear, pale lemon or straw. I would say there's no evidence of gas or no sediment. Viscosity, I'd say, is medium. I'll just leave it at medium. No flaws. Intensity of the wine on the nose. I'd say medium. Some citrus notes, but also things like kind of like Meyer lemon, green apple, pear. There's also like this creaminess to it as far as what I'm getting on the aromatics. Little bit of vanilla, but not like significant notes of it, right? Like it's more subtle.
Okay.
And so I would say that this is probably partial new oak, but not fully. I'd say this wine is pretty youthful. Let's see, on the palate. This wine is dry. Acidity is medium, medium plus. I'm gonna lean more towards medium. It's not as in my face as like some of the like Rieslings and Gewürz that I've had. I would confirm all of the fruits. So Meyer lemon, green apple, pear, definitely that little bit of vanilla. Acidity is, I already said acidity, medium, sorry. And I'd say the climate of this, I'd say moderate. And condition of the fruit or age, 1 to 3 years.
Right.
And because I know what the wine is, so it's like right in that range.
Okay. I won't make you guess it because that would take away all of our fun. And a series of questions, I would say you did a good job. And I think one of the things whenever we're deciding between medium and medium plus, we might also value what we're saying when we're describing. So you did say green apple and lemon, or Meyer lemon, I believe.
Yeah.
So the significant difference between Meyer lemons and regular lemons is like Meyer lemons are slightly more exotic and slightly more waxy. So yeah, you're describing this perfectly, because I can imagine the fruit is a little bit riper than your standard lemon. And the green apple smells tart. So since language is so hard with medium and medium plus, it's kind of like I almost want to divorce that language. What's the shape of the acid? So remember, Michaela's was a knife, or it was like very sharp, and you're kind of saying it's not as sharp. So like, you know, you can use any kind of geometry or any kind of object to describe if I have, but that's going to help me say whether it's old world or new world, I think.
You know, like the like a pizza cutter, how round it is. You know what I mean?
That's so good. Okay. Okay, so sharp with like teeny little spikes. I mean,
Yeah.
everyone just had the aha moment from that. Okay. All right, so we got a pizza cutter spike. So it's almost like it starts off round and then there's little teeny spikes of acid. Okay, so that
Yeah.
really, so what's everybody else guessing? Let's see what our chat says. We have, don't have anyone guessing right now. I could say, you know, it kind of sounds like Albarino in a way. Did you get any kind of like sea spray or salty quality on the wine? Or
No, I didn't.
And a little oak, so probably not oak to Albarino. Could be Chardonnay again. That kind of makes sense to me. Could be like Chablis, although maybe the acid would be higher. What's anybody else thinking? Let's see. Maybe Chardonnay makes sense. Oh, Sauvignon Blanc, I like that call. I didn't even think about that. So, okay, why don't you tell us what we have, Vincent? Some people are saying Sauvignon Blanc.
So it's actually Chardonnay.
Cool.
Rodney Strong, the Chalk Hill.
Great. So Sonoma Coast, or Sonoma Green Chalk Hill, yeah. Amazing. So that's perfect, because again, if you've noticed, there's a similarity between the way you describe yours and the way Shakira described hers, because they had the same grape. They were slightly different, but you had like a lot of people think, oh, California has all this oak, but people are coming off the oak a little bit. So
yeah.
Okay. So last wine up is going to be, we have Tony and Jimmy in the Hamptons somewhere, Hamptoning it up, and they're going to describe it. All right, guys.
All right, you're up, Tony.
Go, Tony.
We're going to tag team a little bit?
Yeah, tag team it.
All right. So it is hard to see color outdoors at this hour, but this is a red wine. It appears to be a pretty dark ruby color, almost opaque at the center, going to a rim that I can't see any sort of rim color variation. Frankly, viscosity is impossible to discern here. No evidence of gas or sediment or anything like that. On the nose, the wine is sound. Can everybody hear me? I'm far away from the speaker. Is it good?
Great.
The wine sound, it is mostly black fruit, a little red fruit, kind of a mixed berry thing happening. I get a little bit of also sort of herbal or spicy, kind of an underbrush aroma also. It is a little peppery. I'm not sure if that's just the theme, and so I've been primed to think that, but I do think it's a little peppery.
No, it has pepper. So
Yeah.
it's sweet terpenes.
Yeah. And it seems kind of oxygenative in style, like it's been made in some sort of maybe used oak environment or something.
Great.
You want to do palate?
Yeah, sure. I'll just follow up that I think the fruit character is sort of ripe, maybe even just a slightly overripe. So of those fruit characters,
This is where Jimmy points out all the parts of the grid that I missed.
On the non-fruit, like we would say friendships. Like, you know, I would sort of say maybe it has like a little bit of meaty, smoky on the nose as well. But let's confirm that on top. The wine is dry. I would also sort of confirm that sort of just ripe red fruit, right, blackberry, sort of black cherry, red cherry, sort of confirming also the some of the non-fruit characteristics, a little bit of like that sort of smoky, meaty, a little bit of alla tapenade type of notes. There's peppery. It's very peppery. I also saw on the palate would also confirm what Tony said about feels like used barrels or sort of large format. It doesn't feel like there's a lot of new oak on this. From a structure perspective, I think it is not. It is tannins are. Doesn't feel like it's sucking that much saliva out, but I would still call it medium plus. Acid is also, I would say, it's actually pretty acidic. It's pretty, yeah, it's like medium plus acid. Alcohol feels like it's burning a little bit. I would call it medium plus as well, probably about 13.5, maybe even closer to 14. Body, this wine is medium body. It's a round wine. It is in balance. It finishes long.
Great. So the question on everybody is, what is he drinking? So let's do that. There may be one thing we should be really asking. I want to be friends with Jimmy and Tony. Comment, Nicole. This is easy. This is called it's called Cork Buzz. So you don't have to actually be at Cork Buzz to make friends in the wine industry. You can be virtually friends. And, you know, like my new best friend is Michaela and Vincent because they volunteered. But in real life too, don't worry. We're gonna see each other, I promise. So no, but the truth is, okay, so the question on everybody's mind should be, I know we're drinking Syrah, are we drinking Old World, New World? Because I think sometimes the keys are, okay, we got the grape and now we have to decide Old World, New World. Other times it's, we have the Old World, New World, now we have to decide the grape. And I want you to realize that sometimes it's like very definitively the grape, and then the debate, the theory, the deduction has to be around what you said or what you didn't say. And I have this like kind of mantra, like, does it finish sour or does it finish kind of fruity? And if I was divided between Old World, New World, if it finished sour, I would be in the Old World. And if it didn't, I would be in New World. So it was so complimentary the way you described it. You had some smoked meat and bacon and olive. I would say that this wine is a salty wine. It kind of reminds me of like drinking dirty martinis, you know, where it has like a little bit of an olive and then a brininess to it. I smell, my husband made smoked pork tonight and I smell it. So I'm not just smelling it here, but I'm smelling it in the air. But it does smell like hot dog or kind of like bacon that's undercooked. So what do you guys think? How many people are Old World? I'm going to stop sharing and you can raise your hand. And how many people are Old World in the descriptor? Okay. And then how many, I guess the rest are New World and everybody else thinks it's a New World. Okay. So Jimmy and Tony or anyone that has backpack wine, what are we drinking?
Who has the bottle?
You do.
Oh.
It's actually.
I was going to say we should have been prepared. Sorry.
You don't know.
Gripping this part.
Oh,
What is it?
it is Best Great Western Shiraz.
Australia.
Victoria, from Australia. Some other people have a different Syrah, like some people have Syrah from other places like Washington State. We mixed it up. I think it's very important that one of the things that I thought was extreme that he said is higher alcohol kind of burns, and also like the overripe fruit. And Old World Shiraz, we said opaque, and we also, or sorry, New World Shiraz, we said opaque, and we also commented that the wine had like a little bit, not as much oak. just keep in mind, we don't really have that much oak use on New World, on Aussie Shiraz. So with that, I'm going to stop recording. Do you want to stop the cloud recording? Yes.